my next guest, Michael Lee Hill, is ready and waiting to go. Before I bring him on, again, I want to try to give him a bit of a wind-up here. He is a musician, and a pretty good one. In fact, I'm going to play a piece of his music later in the show. It's an instrumental piece that he sent me. He's a musician, and he's a UFO experiencer / chaser, and that's sort of the term that I'm pointing, at least. And he seems like a really interesting individual. So without further ado, let's bring Michael on the air. Hello, Michael.
Hey, how you doing, Robert?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Well, good. You are. I wouldn't say this is your 15 minutes of fame, but your profile is certainly on the rise in the alternative news circles these days. How's that going for you in terms of being on these different radio shows and people wanting to hear your story and your experience with the UFOs?
You know, it's really just taking off right now. It's been pretty incredible, actually. The coverage that this story has been getting is just off the hook.
Well, I first read about you in a British newspaper, and that's how I found out about you. So, and then as I began to dig into your story a little bit, I thought, well, this guy's really kind of interesting. Can you kind of fill people in on, why, theoretically, why I'm talking to you today? But even more than that, the evolution of how you began to come in contact with these UFOs in your part of the world.
Yeah, well, I live very close to Lake Erie, and about 5 years ago or so, I was in the backyard with a buddy of mine, and we were looking, if I threw a rock twice really hard, I'd hit the lake. I'm really close. And we seen a UFO right over the lake, and I didn't get that one on film, but it sparked my curiosity to go down to the lake any chance I had and take my camcorder. I had a camcorder, didn't use it for anything, but that was about 5 years ago. So from then on, I've been down there filming, and I've amassed quite a library of these objects.
So obviously, there's a kind of a filtering system where people look at it and say hoax or debunked. Not a lot of that has come about with your videos, and that I think that's interesting. Can you talk about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, one thing, like Bill Burns from the History Channel, he had me on the UFO Hunters show, and he pretty much had just said that the fact that I'd learned how to use my camera and have it on a tripod, like I found out, take the autofocus off, because once it moves out of the frame, you're just screwed. So just little tricks like that. I've learned how to use the camera, and I'm sitting there waiting on them, and so it ends up being some pretty good footage. I wish I had a HD camera, but maybe here soon.
So one of the things that I've read in some of the press and the material around this is that not only are you waiting for them, they seem to be waiting for you at times as well. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, it's been really crazy. After I was on the History Channel show, 2 weeks prior to when they came to visit me, they had interviewed a gentleman named Terrell Copeland in Virginia. And he had filmed the exact same things as I had. He had the exact same story of contact, but he was a Marine, and he was discharged because he had a really rare unknown blood anomaly. And so unbeknownst to me, the History Channel was like, wow, wouldn't it be strange if this guy that's filmed the same thing, had the same story of contact, also ended up with the same unknown blood anomaly? So they just asked me if I'd be willing to fly to Boston to do a follow-up. And I'm like, sure, I didn't know what I was going for. Here they flew, he and I had our medical and blood work done by a Harvard professor. And sure enough, I have the same blood anomaly, and that was revealed on the episode Alien Contact. Well, that has opened a whole Pandora's box for me. Since that episode aired, everything Bill Burns predicted on that show, he told us, he said, I'm going to prove that you guys are hybrids, which that's pretty odd for someone to say,
Right.
And he said that he thought we were being prepared by a behind-the-scenes group, to prepare us to meet these extraterrestrials. Everything he predicted has happened. This behind the scenes military-industrial complex group has contacted me and given me a course of study, so to speak. And all of this has led to actual face-to-face contact with actual beings, and they introduce themselves as the Anunnaki.
So you've experienced this. You've actually been face-to-face with these.
Yeah. I'm not talking channeling or anything like that. I went to a festival in 2008, and they were waiting there to talk to me.
Interesting. Was that a music festival?
No, it was actually a pagan festival. I'm not pagan, but I didn't know what I was really going to. A girlfriend of mine at the time, she had a metaphysical jewelry store, and she had been going to this festival called Sirius Rising. It's in New York in Brushwood. And so I just thought I was going on a camping trip.
Not your typical camping trip, was it?
No, not at all.
So they're there. They're at the festival. Were they in pagan garb? Were they, or what were they like? How did you come in contact with them?
Well, the one guy's name was Loki, and he told me at this time I had never heard of the Anunnaki. I'd never read a Zecharia Sitchin book or anything like this. He told me that they were Anunnaki, and he told me a lot about the mythology, and he kind of took me under his wing. So later that night, he had told me he was going to go back to the campground to make sure everything was buttoned down and safe. And there was this structure at this campground. Everyone called it the genie bottle because it was like a round structure, and once you got inside, it had these fabrics on each panel on the inside that was like, kind of like metaphysical stuff and like Indian looking. And once you got in there, it was kind of discombobulating. It was hard to find which one was the way out,
Right.
So when we got back to the campsite, Loki said, "Hey, there's some people in the genie bottle that have been wanting to talk to you." I said, "All right." And so I went into this genie bottle, and inside this round structure was a round couch, like a smaller round couch. Mm-hmm. And there was a male and a female on the bed. And he went on to tell me, first of all, the whole meeting started around me, and I'm sure you know who David Sarita is.
Only through your the stuff that I've read in conjunction with you.
Right on. David I'm a big fan of his work, and that's actually how all this got started. But that's another story. David and I had collaborated on a documentary called From Here to Andromeda, and it had testimony by Boyd Bushman from Lockheed Martin. He's a senior scientist about anti-gravity, and revealed a lot of stuff about Roswell. Well, this individual was like, "We want to know what you know about this, because I work for a group of people who decide what gets released to the masses, revealing the extraterrestrial subject, and this information was never supposed to be released. You've caused a lot of problems for a lot of people behind the scenes and caused a lot of finger pointing." And he actually said he was a family member of the J. Allen Hynek family. And he said that that family is still in charge of releasing what gets released to the masses. He said J. Allen Hynek actually was very upset with the whole thing. He said that he would be told to say one thing one day, and then the next day they would make him totally contradict himself. You know?
Yeah.
But this went on to when they found out that I was the co-producer on this film, and he said, "Well, we need to know what you know." And they brought out like a wand that I could feel it stimulating my pineal gland, the third eye, And everything changed at that point. And he said, it went into actually the whole, like, up until that point, it was pretty much a hostile meeting.
Right.
And from that point forward, everything changed. He goes, "Oh, you're one of us," pretty much. And I know that sounds crazy, but he's like, "Well, it's a miracle that you've ended up here, and we've been waiting for you to have a council meeting. If you're game, we can do it right now." I said, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about, but sure." And they went on to just want everyone that was in that genie bottle. At that point, it was about 5 people. everyone's viewpoints on if mankind was ready for contact and what effect it would have on government and religion and economic systems and everything else. And at the end of that meeting, everyone was in, I had no idea why I was there, but I'll talk to anyone about, this subject because I'm absolutely a fan and a student of it. And they said that pretty much we will know Nibiru will be visible in our skies soon. They said it ain't no hiding this fact, so they wanted to know everyone's thoughts, and their conclusion was that we will have first contact with the Anunnaki, and humanity will be viewed as equals and be able to evolve now without any outside influences manipulating the situation,
So what did they look like?
They look like you and I see, this is a part of my education that I'm kind of confused at. Because I hear in their native state, they're like 16 feet tall albinos. They have white hair, red eyes, and they're very tall. But somehow they have created a bloodline here on the planet where they can incarnate into a human vessel that has more energy available at a cellular level. It's a bloodline. And when this happens, like this gentleman that I'm talking to, that the Anunnaki came through, when the Anunnaki came through, he became faceless. It was like there was no face whatsoever. And I asked him, I said, can I see your faces? And he said, you'll have to wait till tomorrow to see our true faces. And I'm like, okay. I thought that was interesting anyhow, because then I knew I was going to be with him the next day. But when we left that structure, I thought, screw it, I'm going to take a peek. What could be the worst that happens? When I turned around and looked, he looked translucent, like I could see right through him, like not really physical. I know it sounds cliche, but he did have almost like a reptilian gargoyle thing, but it wasn't scary at all. It was actually looked very regal, and so you got a translucent, almost like not quite physical being, and he had a robe that was emitting light that was on him.
Interesting.
And that ended that meeting that night.
So you go back to your tent with your girlfriend and you say, you won't believe what just happened, right? I mean, how did that go down?
It was funny because actually, because of her metaphysical jewelry store, she had booked another field trip, let's call it, to another place. I forget where it was. So she had to leave for a day, and I was there by myself when all this went down. Yeah, so she didn't know until she got back.
Okay, well that's interesting. And so have you had contact with these people since then?
Yes. And this is where it gets a little confusing for me, and I'm learning how the Anunnaki, it seems like they can communicate through different people. It's somehow, I'm not sure how this works, but I was in the hot tub with a really good friend of mine. Him and his wife have been friends of mine for about 15 years, and we were in the hot tub and we were talking, and it just went to a level of intelligence that I'd never talked to him on this level before. And I said, man, I go, you know you're not from around here, don't you? And he said, Michael, look at my face and tell me what you see. And when I looked at his face, he went faceless. And I said, wow, you look exactly like the person that I met in New York. And he said, bingo, nice to talk to you again. At this point, I was pretty freaked out, and I said, who are you? And he said, I am the muse. I inspire creativity, wit, and humor in the human race. I thought, well, all right, this is getting a little strange. So a couple minutes go by, and he goes, hey, do you want to see a movie that I inspired? And I said, sure. So we got out of the hot tub, and I looked, and his face had returned, which was good. So we went into the house, and he puts on this movie called Bat Thumb. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it was a whole movie that was done with people's thumbs with a face superimposed over their thumb. And it was really funny. It's like a crazy comedy. And so Bat Thumb is going through this movie, and he comes against his arch nemesis, and guess what his name was? No Face.
No Face. Interesting.
Yeah, and my friend just looked at me and kind of grinned, and I got it. As a matter of fact, so when No Face pulls off, he's got a hood over his thumb. It's just a normal thumb and has no face on it, you know.
Right.
But it freaked me out so bad. I was going to stay at their house that night, and I came up with an excuse not to stay there that night. I still, you know. But it's funny, you find out Ra, you know, which is Marduk, which is of the Anunnaki, he's known as the Hidden One, or No Face.
Right.
I think, you know, I think it's all, I mean, pretty much, if truly, if what we're living in is a holographic reality that's made of light and sound, maybe they can hop in on that signal and over. You know what I'm saying?
No, I know exactly what you're saying. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we need to get to this point of having these conversations because truly no one's ever asked, what is it like to meet a multidimensional being?
Well, yeah, and on the back end of that, it's like, what's your point of reference, right? I mean, and what do you compare it to? It you know, and for me, you know, my head goes into maybe a more, I wouldn't call it a judgmental place, but a critical place. And my thought would be, well, who is this person or this energy, and can I trust them? I mean, that would be my next question. And have you kind of run through those tapes in your head?
Man, you know what? I hate to sound coy about it, but it doesn't even much matter to me. I'll tell you, I learned my own spirituality from the Seth material. I don't know if you ever heard of the.
Sure.
You know, I asked the universe for answers a long time ago. We're talking in the early 90s, and I was pretty much led to that bed of information, and it changed my life. So, you know, as far as contact now with beings that are labeling themselves extraterrestrial, it is, you know, first of all, I think I got a pretty good BS meter, you know, and I'm pretty cognizant of energy, and the meeting with Marduk, you got to understand, Marduk, you know, this gets into a weird subject, but Graham Hancock was decoding this big mural, and he called it the myth of the Milky Ocean, the churning of the Milky Ocean. And he said the most important part of this mythology is the Milky Ocean itself, because that is what these peoples thought the whole universe rested on. He said there was a team of churners, one team of darkness and one team of light, but it wasn't a fact of one team beating the other. What was concealed in this was that they were actually working in cooperation to churn the evolution of mankind into immortality. If you kind of take that role, that idea, Marduk has been reflecting a negative polarity here.
Right.
So if you have fear, it's almost like the agents in the Matrix that, you know, like just monitor the mass consciousness, and if they see someone vibrating fear, they'll make sure you get a chance to experience your own dark thought forms, you know?
Right,
and so you get a chance to hopefully heal it and cleanse it by choosing love over fear. Because if, you know, thoughts have energy, electromagnetic reality, and energy can't be created or destroyed. It needs to be transmuted. Well, again, no one's really asked the question, how do you transmute a negative thought form? Well, you transmute it into the higher octave of itself into love by choosing love over fear like you did the last time, you know?
Right.
So I guess my point is, when I met this being, it was very hostile at the beginning, so it was not the best energy. You were asking me if I had a weird feeling out of any of this.
Yeah.
But after they did the wand with it looked like a purple LED at the end of it, and I guess from what I've been told, they probably can access the Akashic records that way, and see exactly who you are, and that changed everything. And all the hostility and everything is like that veil just dropped, and we just talk like people.
So let's talk a little bit about this blood anomaly. Do you feel comfortable like sharing like what that is and what your what the guy in Virginia was like? You guys looked at each other and you said, "Hey, you know, we're part of the same tribe here." So what's that about?
What it is our brains release a enzyme called creatine kinase, and it's usually released by the body when there's been muscle damage. And the normal amount of that is approximately 25 parts per liter of blood. And when the body's been damaged, creatine kinase brings oxygen into the bloodstream to facilitate healing, and it'll shoot up to about 300 parts per liter of blood, when the body's been damaged. Well, what they found is this other gentleman and our levels are above 2,000 constantly, 24/7. There's no medical reason that the numbers are so high. So they said, really, in turn, what's happening is the body is being super oxygenated. Is that a word?
Right. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And in turn, check this out. This is from an insider. I received some information. Let me find this for you, because it's exactly what we're talking about. It says, do you realize that the blood anomaly is something akin to the midichlorians from the Star Wars movies? Oxygen carrying capacity in blood equals percentage potential of the nervous system usage and your body's overall potential electrical capacitance abilities. Whether you use the force or not, the potential is still there. The Scientologists can test for this with that machine of theirs that they use for auditing. A question that triggers a deep emotional response would show a much stronger reading with you than most anyone else. So what they're saying is the extra creatine kinase is bringing super levels of oxygen, which in turn brings more energy, like chi, life force, into the body to be available for whatever. I would like to think I use it for music.
Well, I would assume, too, that you probably don't get sick.
Not very often. Sometimes you do feel life gives you one, but for the most part, I'm very healthy.
Yeah, I mean, a super oxygenated body would ward off a lot of viruses and bacteria, and you'd be fairly anaerobic, actually. So, what about go ahead.
If you wish, I don't know if I'll be happy I'm doing this, but I have a letter here from, as I told you, I was contacted by this military industrial complex of insiders.
Right.
And, what had happened was a couple years ago now, I had another girlfriend, and she ended up being black ops. She took a blood sample from me. So I told these people what had happened, and this was their response, and it has to do with the bloodline as well. It says, it is not a complete surprise to any of us that you were a target of deceit, trickery, malfeasance, misuse, abuse, misinformation, and disinformation. To top it all off, you've chosen a most public life that looks like it's reflected back to you all of the fears embedded in human soul from long ago. But in between all the horsepucky, you have been fed some mana, but you will have to figure out which is which, having chosen the road you are taking. As to your blood anomaly, don't feel lonesome. There are others like you, people that don't get sick very easily, who have factors and strange enzymes that look like nanoscience out of some pulp fiction novel, and who live very, very long lives and can appear and disappear at will. No big deal. What is a big deal is what you do with the hand that has been dealt to you. It is obvious that you have gone on a testing spree of latent faculties and were mucked with to see what you would do and how you would react. If someone wanted you dead, you'd be dead long ago, but that is not what this is about. This is almost done. What this is about for you and for all the observers interested in your trek is what's between your ears and in that nervous system of yours, fed by the blood others want. And what you are lacking is systematically useful information about it, about yourself, about your descent, about your own biology, about your own faculties you have experienced, which has led you to fear and then to new realizations, living a most public life with without boundaries and self-imposed limits is like being a candy store yourself and everyone wanting to have a lick at you for the taste, as this woman appeared to do. Well, that's another story. So it says, the world knows now that you have something different in your blood, even without you seriously knowing what it is. Or do you? Do you know what it is that is so sought after as confirmation of descent? If not, why not? If yes, what are you going to do with this information? And when are you going to stop the world and get off of it like you would a bus for a while and take stock of the experiences and of the questions before you? So obviously they're talking about, I didn't know any of this, but when the Anunnaki met me, they told me that I was of their bloodline here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So obviously that's what people were asking me, and I knew, as I said, when I met them, I hadn't even read a Zecharia Sitchin book.
Right.
So I'm giving you a lot of information of what I've come to me from the outside. And
right.
It makes sense because I've lived it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Now, do you have brothers and sisters?
I was adopted.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a whole another interesting thing I really can't get into right now. I'll tell you what happened is, Bill Burns asked me, he said, well, can you contact your biological parents for the first time in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and see if this is something genetic, see if it's a family trait or whatever. So for the first time in 2000, probably it was late 2008, I met my biological mother for the first time, and I met my two half-sisters, and this is when we found out that my biological father is someone very famous, a musician actually, probably one of the biggest musicians in the world. And so this has been another just mind, you-know-what. So Bill Burns just contacted me. He said, I'm working on the manuscript for my new book, UFO Hunters Season 1, the book. He said, I'm up to your chapter, and would it be okay if we revealed in the book who we found out was your biological father? I said, well, I guess, that's what happened. It's not made up. And, obviously a DNA test would be needed, but what I can tell you is what my biological mother knew about secret societies and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have much question in my mind that it's actually true. But I can't really reveal who that is right now.
Well, so what was your mom like? Was she cool? Could you relate to her? I mean, did she
Yeah, she's very cool. She's very traumatized because of, actually they did a number on her, like mentally, pretty much me and her were not a part of their plan, especially for this person. They had already plans in play for him to go solo and become who he is in the world, and me and my mom wasn't a part of that,
Right.
But that's going to be out this year, and I'm really, yeah.
So that's going to be in a book that Bill Burns is publishing?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Well, we're looking forward to that. When is that coming out?
It should be this year. He said he's working on the manuscript right now, and he was just up to my episode in the show, which was called Alien Contact. So he was updating with all the information, because it's really odd, actually. And I've asked him point blank how he knew what he knew, because, he told me all this would be happening when he met me to interview me, which was in the late 2007, early 2008. And he told me, he's like, you have he said some things that were really confusing to me then, and now they make sense. Let's just leave it at that. So I've asked him, how did you know? And he's never answered me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what about the guy from Virginia? Did you feel like a kinship with him, or?
Absolutely. He's such a dear soul, and he's very, very educated, and more like all kinds of religions. It's not just, he's like a religious scholar, I guess,
right.
But very insightful at the same time. And the whole thing, actually, it sounds like he got turned off of it a little bit. They had him on ABC and just totally ripped everyone on the show and pretty much made him look like kooks, you know.
Right.
And I think it kind of took some of the wind out of his sails to have anything. And you know, he had been contacted by a military-industrial complex group, and they had told him not to do the History Channel show. And pretty much they cut off all communication with him when that happened. So he's not had the most, I guess, pleasant time after the show. But he's a great guy.
Interesting. So your experiences seem to be very different. I mean, sounds like he is experiencing some more challenging circumstances, and you're just kind of going with the flow here, it feels like.
You know what, though? I mean, we've both had, you know, one of the first things that happened to me, I had my very first interview was with 19 Action News here, and 1 week before it, I was drugged, and I woke up with my jaw shattered. It was broken twice on the left side and once on the right side. And I had to have the left side of my face wired back together. Well, I almost canceled that interview because when I got back from the hospital, I couldn't talk real well, as you can imagine. But something came over me. I just knew it wasn't right, you know. And I said, I'll mumble through it, you know. So I did. And that's the actual broadcast that something shut down their whole studio. All their computer systems crashed. And when they went to the next story, everything started working perfectly again. So if you've seen some of the Lake Erie UFOs in the mainstream news stuff I put together, the first one she's talking about, you remember the last time we tried to play Michael Lee Hill's footage and everything crashed. I guess my point for telling you this is it's like I truly believe that people that start to wake up, you know, to bigger realities. And, you know, we've seen the corruption of oil and banking families that are truly running everything.
Right.
You know, if they're going to come in contact with beings that would put their oil-based economic slavery system, make it obsolete, you know, of course they would fight it tooth and nail because they're not looking out for the benefit of the many.
Right.
They're looking out for their own pockets.
Right.
So, I think that's about to change, though.
Well, it has to. I mean, we're at a tipping point. You know, I mean, we can't continue to live with the fiction of a petroleum-based economy when the former CEO of Lockheed Skunk Works on his deathbed is Ben Rich is telling people that you know, hey, look, we got the goods and we've had it for a while. And we go to the stars, and it's going to take an act of God for us to give it up. I mean, that's a reality. These technologies exist, and we are living in a fiction. It's a complete and utter fiction.
Yes, yes. How do you handle that mentally, by the way? This is something I know it's true, and I've been learning this, but, man, it kind of makes you feel insane because most people are still under that illusion. You know what I mean? And you go to try to tell someone something, and it's just so far out of their belief system that you might as well be talking another language.
Yeah, well, the way I remedy that is I talk to people like you. You know, I have my own radio show, so I can. This is like therapy for me, man. You know.
Cool.
So, but this is the reality, the quote unquote reality that we're living in is this phony, you know, petroleum based economy, and it's not real. I mean, it's real to the extent that, you know, it's impacting our environment, it's impacting our pocketbooks. But at the end of the day, man, we got different worlds going on in this place, and obviously you're an experiencer of that because you are literally experiencing a variety of worlds here.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful thing in my life, actually. You know, when you see these things with your own eyes, because film really doesn't even do it any justice. They are so bright, and it's almost like multidimensional colors. They're pulsating these colors that are so vivid and bright. But in 1 second, it'll go through like the whole color spectrum. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's one thing people don't know. You can take this footage and go frame by frame, which I don't know what film is. It's like 30 frames a second or something like that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Approximately.
Yeah.
And so every 1/30th of a second, you're going through frame by frame, and it'll be like red. The next one will be like totally purple. The next one will be gold. It's like it's totally changed colors in 1/30th of a second. If you can go through and just go through that frame by frame, it's pretty mind blowing.
How deep is Lake Erie?
It's one of the shallowest. It is the shallowest of all the Great Lakes. I think it averages about 80 feet. It's not deep at all. What's interesting is, let me tell you some things about this that people don't really know. First of all, Morton Salt is right here. There's the largest salt deposits right under the lake in the whole world, really. So there's huge salt mines under there, and I've heard that there's a base under there, like a secret base under Lake Erie that's been there a very long time. I'm not even talking our own people's base, you know?
Right, right.
Secondly, in the new footage that I put out, when I pan to the right and that object comes by right, and you can hear me say, right there is CEI power plant. First of all, since 9/11, that's a no-fly zone. That all coal, nuclear power plants and like dams, all of them have no-fly zones around them, and that was proven by the History Channel as well. And another fact that I don't think people are putting two and two together is that exact same power plant, CEI in East Lake, is the exact same power plant from the famous 1988 East Lake UFO event where the giant triangle was down by that power plant and the Coast Guard. First of all, the East Lake Police Department went down. They said, well, we don't know what to do. So they called the Fairport Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard went down and witnessed this thing for close to a half hour and made an actual Coast Guard report. And I've tracked down that actual Coast Guard report as well. But that's the exact same place that these things are still showing up to this day.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot more history here than people know. And actually, I've got this phenomenon over the lake traced back into the 1800s. Local newspapers here at that time, like check this out. Scientific American, News Series, Volume 3, Issue 8, August 18th, 1860. And it says, the Cleveland, Ohio Herald says that they called them wizard lights, and it said that they would see these objects that looked like a ship was on fire, but it was, 100 feet above the lake, and that they would think it was some kind of weird optical illusion of a boat burning out there, and they would go out and there would be no wreckage ever came in. And it was pretty well reported that all these people along the lake would be witnessing these things. And so I think that negates as well that these are anything, because a lot of people go, well, maybe it's our military.
Right.
Well, not if it's back in the 1800s as well, witnessed and reported,
Right. Yeah, 1860, that's going back a ways.
Yeah, well, there's one, that one was August 18th, 1860, and then another one was a curious phenomenon on Lake Erie, Brooklyn Eagle, Thursday, December 12th, 1867.
Wow, interesting stuff, man. Fascinating. Yeah. So, when you were a kid, you were growing up, did you feel different? I mean, most kids at some point or another feel different, but was that a big feeling for you as you were growing up?
Yeah, I actually had contact my whole life as far as just strange things would happen, a strange person would show up here and there, and I would ask my parents, and they wouldn't know who it was, or, I remember as a child, I would get visited by, I guess they would be called what you would call a gray today, but at that time, I didn't know what to refer them as. To me, I thought of elves, like Santa Claus's elves. So my mom said I always used to ask her, what's Santa Claus's elves doing visiting me? It's not Christmas,
Right. Right.
And nothing negative, no horror stories to report from back there. But I do remember, I remember one time in particular, I was laying down. I must have been only about 8 years old, and I was laying down in the back of my aunt's, what's that called, like a station wagon. And so, if you're laying down on your back, you could see out the windows up. And I was with my cousins back there, and there was a classic UFO that was right above, telephone pole height. And I remember very clearly it being there, and I was really confused because no one else could see it. I kept going, it's right there, hello.
Right, interesting.
Yeah.
I had an experience like that one time. I saw a UFO in Oakland, of all places, and I'm not sure if anybody else saw it. I mean, it was very clear to me. It was a large silver orb. And what was really a trip was I was in a play at the time, and there was an actress in the play, and she lived in San Francisco, and she was driving across the Golden Gate Bridge, and she saw the exact same thing. But the guy in the car didn't see it. She was giving a cast member a ride home, and he didn't see it. So we both had this experience. It was really a trip. And this was not a person. This woman was not a person given to falling head over heels for phenomena. She was very much a skeptic. So, I mean, it was a very interesting share that I had with her. It was almost like, in a weird way, that orb, that large silver orb, brought us together. It was unique.
Oh, very cool. Let me ask you, what's your thoughts on that? How two people could be standing side by side, and one of them see it and one of them doesn't?
You know, I don't have
a frequency, or
yeah. I mean, that would, that'd be my first guess. But I don't really have an explanation for that. I mean, it's really a phenomena that I don't quite understand, and it could be a frequency thing. Like, certain people can see certain things that other people can't see, and and it could be momentary. It could be a lifetime. And in that moment, that was definitely something that the two of us were meant to see together. And we wound up, being boyfriend and girlfriend for a while as a result of that. It was a very cool experience. So, yeah. Now, you, in addition to all of this, you're also a musician. You have a band?
Yes. I have the Michael Lee Hill Project. Okay. And I've been doing some shows around Cleveland. One of the coolest things is one of my heroes and inspiration to even play music. His name is Dan Reed. I've been playing guitar for him recently when he comes into town. I played the last 3 concerts here in Cleveland with him. And so that was a real treat, getting to play with your heroes.
Yeah, Dan Reed of the Dan Reed Network, right?
Yes, yeah.
And weren't they originally out of Portland?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember they got a big break because they opened for the Stones.
Yeah, 60 shows they played with the Stones. You know what happened is Dan said that's actually kind of what, burst his bubble. He got to the top of the mountain there, and, he said that he thought once you got to that point, all your troubles would go away and whatnot, and they didn't. He said he's seen a lot more drama and stuff than he even thought, and at the same time, he was hired by Spin Magazine to go interview the Dalai Lama, and he said it just changed his mind, and he took all the money he made, dropped off the face of the planet, and moved into a Tibetan monastery and lived with the monks for years. And he's done just lived in Jerusalem and studied with a lot of very devout, different religious sects, actually. Mm-hmm. And he's a contactee himself with the Arcturians. And so it's been, as a matter of fact, when I met him, it was very strange because, as I told you, I was a huge fan of his. And so he just recently came out of this sabbatical he's been on and started doing music again for the first time. So I found out that the closest place he was coming to was Pittsburgh, from me in Cleveland. So I made the road trip, and me and a friend went to meet him, and ended up afterwards, bought him a drink, and we're sitting there talking, and he's like, do you know of any place to get a good hotel tonight? Because I haven't even booked somewhere. And we're like, well, we're within walking distance. Come on down, and he did, and we've been great friends ever since.
Well, that's a cool story. You get to play with somebody that, whose music you really dug over the years, and that's great, man. Yeah. I remember when I think it was when they were opening for the Stones. I mean, he was on fire. I mean, he was all over MTV. I mean, Dan Reed Network had Next Big Thing written all over it.
Yeah, Bill Graham, legendary show promoter, manager. He brought Hendrix and the Beatles here to the States. He took Dan under his wing, thought he was the most talented person ever. Well, I'll tell you what, Dan is a very special person. He's probably going to kill me for saying this, but check this out. So we're in Pittsburgh. First night I ever meet my hero, 3 o'clock in the morning, we decide to get something to eat. So we find this open all night Cambodian food place. There's a couple blocks down in Pittsburgh. So me and my lady friend that was with me, her name's Claudia, and Dan, we're walking down the streets, and it's cool because she witnessed this whole thing, and I'm glad, because I don't know, I was losing my mind or something. But Dan, out of nowhere, he turns to me and goes, "Michael, you have the bloodline." And I said, "Well, I've heard something about it. I really don't know what that means." And he goes, "I know, but you will. It's the royal bloodline." I said, "Well, I really don't know what that means, you know?" So when we got to the Cambodian food place, I said, "Dan, how did you know about the blood issue?" I said, "Did you see the History Channel show?" And he said, "No, I didn't." At that point, I was really confused. Like, well, how did you know? You know? And he said, "Michael, I can tell the minute I meet someone if they're of the bloodline." He said, "That's why I'm here, to meet these people as they awaken. And it's no coincidence you and I are talking right now."
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating stuff. All right, so I'm laying odds that, and you don't have to say yes or no, but I'm laying odds that your birth father is Jimmy Page. That's my guess.
No.
Okay. All right.
You know what? It's going to be coming out in the book anyhow. It's Eric Clapton.
Eric Clapton. That was my second guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's play some of your music. I uploaded Testing 1 2 3, which is a killer instrumental track. So let's play this.
Thank you.
And let's come back after the track, and we'll talk about the track, and then we'll talk about what you're going to be doing next on your Magical Mystery Tour. Okay?
Cool.
All right. So this is Michael V. Hill. Testing 1 2 3. So that's Testing 1, 2, 3, a absolutely smoking track by our guest, Michael Lee Hill. Killer guitar work on that, man.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah. You know, I have
fun one to play.
I have a funny Eric Clapton story. I was hanging out one time with Tony Saunders. And Tony Saunders is Merle Saunders' son. Merle, of course, was Jerry Garcia's bass player when Jerry went solo. And Tony told Tony told me that Eric Clapton hired him one time to do these sessions down in his island in the Caribbean. And it was Tony and Eric Clapton, Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick, and the drummer Simon Phillips. And so there's stories I can't share, but there's one story I can share. And Tony Clapton had these boats, and people could take them out and cruise around and stuff during the day, and they'd go out and they'd play at night, they'd jam at night. So Tony went out in one of these boats, and he went out, and all of a sudden he was pretty far out, and he ran out of gas, and he's just floating there in the water, and I don't think he had a radio. And he didn't know what to do. I mean, he was literally drifting out to sea. And all of a sudden, according to him, this boat comes out of nowhere, and he said this stunning woman was piloting the boat. She threw him a line and towed him in, and he was like, you know, I would love to get her number or whatever. And then he turned around to thank her after he got docked. He turned around, the boat was gone.
Imagine that, huh?
Yeah, and then he said, I'll never forget the name of the boat. So what was it? He said Seraphim. I said, are you kidding me? Seraphim?
Wow.
And I said, you know what that means? And he says, no. And so I opened up the dictionary and I read him the definition of seraphim. And I mean, he literally just, you know, he froze. It was like, oh my God, you know, I got rescued by an angel. I mean, that was an angel that came and literally towed me. So, apparently there was a lot of interesting stuff that was going on around Clapton on this island. So
it was really interesting. Check out Google. It's called Militia One, I think, was a group. I forget the lady's name, but it was Eric Clapton, Carlos Santana, and this woman pretty much got a lot of Hollywood stars and musicians that were pretty much fighting the Illuminati in however they could. And it's pretty interesting because some of the things she reveals in that interview is exactly, you know, as far as them fighting back because they were brought up in that system and made to witness a lot of things that they didn't like.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they were fighting back. It's a pretty interesting interview.
Well, yeah, and then this whole thing with his son Connor, you know, and there's like that whole kind of layer of ritual sacrifice with that that's really, you know, kind of creepy and very dark. Yeah. So what's next for you? Where is life taking you?
I don't know, man. Really, just taking it one day at a time, and really, I just want to play music. You know, get my band tightened up more and more, and getting a lineup solidified. Been playing around town. Been talking to the Sci-Fi Channel right now regarding the Lake Erie stuff. I've done a ton of research, so I am all ready to tell my story, and I really thank you for giving me a chance to do that as well. So if you know, who knows what will come out of this? I hope, you know, people need to know. First of all, it's not just happening over Lake Erie. These exact same objects are showing up worldwide.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, do you know who Bigelow Aerospace is?
Yeah.
I was contacted by one of their investigators, and he went on record, said they know that these are not terrestrial lights. He went as far as to say there's a lot of money involved in obtaining this type of technology. It's showing up worldwide right now, and it's all the same phenomenon. And so I think people need to put two and two together and realize that something really big is going on here.
Yeah.
And It would make sense to me if it is the Anunnaki, because there's a lot of, they're intertwined in all of our history and actually all of our religions. These same beings are referenced,
Yeah.
Those from heaven that came to earth and blah, blah, blah. And
Right.
so I think I'm looking forward to meeting them. Again,
Okay.
I've never met them in their native state, I want to say,
Right.
So I think that would be interesting.
Well, I'm glad I met you, and you can come on my show anytime you want, Michael. It's a pleasure. And
thank you. It's been a pleasure as well talking to you. You're very intelligent on the subject and great questions.
And you've got a MySpace page, so if people want to hear more of your music,
yeah, MySpace. I got a few songs on there, and on Facebook, just look up Michael Lee Hill. On YouTube, you can go to Frozen Hill, and I got all my videos up there, including some brand new stuff. So check it out and drop me a line and say hello.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on, Michael. Wish you all the best, and hope to have you again on sometime, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that wraps up a fascinating 2 hours worth of radio, starting off with Dr. Hildegard Staninger and getting very in-depth around some of the things that are going on in our bodies, and her latest book, Portals to Destiny, and the second hour with Michael Lee Hill. Fantastic guest and interesting guy, and obviously a smoking guitar player, and Eric Clapton's son. So thank you for joining me today. It's Friday, and we've got 2 days worth of more chaos, confusion, excitement, ecstasy, longing, despair, joy, hope, and ultimately life. 48 hours. It all awaits you, starting right now. This is Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to a very F.A.R. Friday. And on Monday, I'll be back with the Monday Macchiato. And we'll have, speaking of UFOs, Miss Flying Saucer, Eric O'Hannon will be back on. And we'll talk maybe more about some of Michael's work and a few other sightings. Next Wednesday, I will have Molly Hall from About Astrology, my pal Molly Hall. And she'll be on Wednesday, Navigating the Astrological Matrix. And on Friday, I have another guest who's written a book called Hey Buddy. His name is Gary Johnson. And it's about the life of Buddy Holly. But more than the life, it's about the death of Buddy Holly and what might have happened and why Buddy Holly's death still matters. So he's going to be on the show next Friday, and we'll be talking about Buddy Holly and his untimely demise. So until Monday, take very good care of yourself and use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. This is Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to Friday Farcast, and let's go with a little toy matinee and last plane out. Here we go.